Okay, so let's dive into a really key moment. We're looking at Nehemiah chapter 11 today.
Right. A fascinating chapter. It sort of shifts focus, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
After all the big rebuilding work, like the wall, this gets down to the people, to the logistics of settling the land again.
Exactly. How do you actually get a society functioning again, especially repopulating the main city, Jerusalem?
Yeah, it's one thing to have the structures, but you need people living there, making it a community.
And the challenge was huge. I mean, you had people scattered, the capital needed a population boost, and they had to rebuild the whole social and religious fabric, not just in the city, but everywhere.
And this chapter, Nehemiah 11, it lays out a very specific plan for that, doesn't it?
It does. It wasn't a free-for-all. They designated a portion of the people specifically to move into Jerusalem, the holy city.
While the others stayed put.
The rest stayed in their existing towns, their ancestral lands. It was like a two-pronged strategy, really. Secure the capital, but also reclaim the countryside.
Makes sense.
So,
So how did they decide? Who had to pack up and move to Jerusalem? That sounds like a potentially difficult assignment.
well, the text points to a system. It seems it was a mix of things, actually.
Okay.
The main method mentioned is casting lots.
Casting lots, like drawing straws almost.
Kind of, yeah. One out of every 10 people was chosen this way to live in Jerusalem. You can imagine that moment, right? Your future location decided by lot, seen as, well, providentially guided.
Wow. That's a huge life change based on, essentially, chance. But you said it was a mix.
Right. It wasn't only the lots. The chapter specifically praises the men who volunteered to live in Jerusalem.
Ah, okay. So there was an element of personal choice and dedication, too.
Exactly. They recognized and honored those who willingly took on the task. It shows this blend of, organized requirement and individual sacrifice.
And that combination is really interesting, tells you something about the community's mindset. Okay, so once they figured out who was going, who actually ended up settling inside Jerusalem's walls, according to this chapter.
It gives us quite a bit of detail, like a snapshot of the city's new demographics. First, it mentions the leaders of the people settling there.
The leadership, right.
Then it gets into the main tribal groups, descendants of Judah and descendants of Benjamin.
And it's pretty specific about them, isn't it? I remember seeing names and genealogy.
Very specific. For the Judahites, it lists names like Athiah and Messiah, tracing their lines back.
Why include all that ancestry, do you think?
Well, the fact that they bothered with that level of detail, it really highlights how important tribal identity and family heritage were. It wasn't just about numbers. It was about reestablishing these specific lineages in their capital.
Got it. Does it give numbers for these groups?
It does. For the descendants of Perez, who were part of Judah, it lists 468 able men living in Jerusalem.
468. Okay. And the Benjamites, were they a big group too?
Yes, definitely. The text names Salu and his followers, again tracing the lineage. And the number given for the Benjamites in Jerusalem is 928 men.
Whoa, 928. That's almost double the Judahite number mentioned there. So a really strong Benjaminite presence.
Seems that way, yes.
Was there any kind of organization within the city for these groups, like local leaders?
There was. It mentions Joel, son of Zikri, as the chief officer over the Benjamites.
Okay.
And interestingly, someone named Judah, son of Hassenuah, was in charge of the 2nd district of the city.
The 2nd district? What was that?
The text doesn't really explain what the 2nd district means, but just mentioning it suggests some kind of administrative or geographical division was already in place.
Fascinating. Okay, moving beyond the main tribal groups, what about the religious personnel? They must have been critical for Jerusalem.
Absolutely vital. The chapter spends a good amount of time on the priests and Levites who settled there. They were essential for the temple for religious life.
Makes sense. Who were some of the key figures?
Among the priests, it lists people like Sariah, son of Hilkiah. He's described as the supervisor in the house of God.
The supervisor, so overseeing temple operations.
Right, and it gives numbers again, showing the scale. Sariah had 822 associates working at the temple.
822, just his group.
Just his associates listed there. Then there were other priestly families, led by Adiah and Amashsai, with their associates numbering 242 and 128 respectively. These were all described as able men.
So if you add that up, that's over 1,000 priests right there.
Oh, well over 1,000, yeah. It really drives home how central the temple and its services were to this whole repopulation effort in Jerusalem.
Definitely emphasizes the priority. What about the Levites? What were their roles?
The Levites had various crucial jobs, too. Some, like Shemaiah, were heads overseeing the outside work of the house of God, maybe administration or maintenance.
Okay.
Others, like Mattaniah, were directors leading Thanksgiving and prayer. It mentions Bakbukia was his second, and Abda is also named.
So administration, music, prayer, leadership, quite diverse. What was the total number of Levites listed for the city?
The total given for Levites in the Holy City is 284.
284. So you combine that with the priests. Over 1,500 religious personnel specifically listed as settling in Jerusalem.
Exactly. It's a huge indicator of priorities.
Yeah.
Reestablishing proper worship and temple function was clearly paramount.
Beyond the priests and Levites, who else did the city need to function securely?
Well, security was obviously key. The gatekeepers are mentioned, Akub, Talmon, and their associates.
How many of them?
172 men assigned to keep watch at the city gates. Vital for a newly resettled city.
Makes sense. Anyone else mentioned living within the walls?
Yes, the temple servants are noted. They lived on the hill of Ophel, which was an area close to the Temple Mount, sort of designated for temple service personnel. Ziha and Gishpa were in charge of them.
And didn't it specifically mention the singers, too?
It did, yes. It singles out Uzi, son of Bani, as the chief officer of the Levite singers in Jerusalem, descendants of Asaph.
Right, the famous musical guild.
And there's this fascinating detail. It says the singers were under the king's orders, regulating their daily activity.
The king's orders, meaning the Persian king.
Presumably, yes. It shows this level of structured oversight, even down to the daily schedule for temple music, possibly linked to provisions or support from the wider administration.
That level of detail is amazing. It paints such a picture of an organized society being deliberately put back together.
Okay, so that covers Jerusalem pretty thoroughly. Leaders, Judahites, Benjamites, priests, Levites, gatekeepers, temple servants, singers. What about everyone else? The 9 out of 10 who weren't chosen by lot or didn't volunteer?
Right, the majority. The text says the rest of the Israelites, plus the other priests and Levites not assigned to Jerusalem, remained in the towns of Judah.
Back on their ancestral lands.
Exactly. Each on their ancestral property, it says. This shows that parallel effort repopulating the capital, yes, but also reestablishing life across the whole territory.
And the chapter doesn't just say other towns, does it? It actually lists them. It does, quite extensively, and gives us a real geographical map of the resettlement. For the people of Judah, living out in the villages and fields, it lists places like Kiriath Arba, that's Hebron, down south Dibon, Beersheba, way down in the Negev, Ziklag, Zorah, Jarmuth.
Wow, that covers a lot of ground.
Lachish, Azekah.
Yeah.
It's a big list, showing they were repopulating key spots all through Judah's traditional territory. It even gives a boundary, from Beersheba all the way to the Valley of Hinnom, right outside Jerusalem.
So from the far south right up to the edge of the capital, that gives a clear sense of the extent of Judahite resettlement. Was it similar for the Benjamites outside Jerusalem?
Yes, a parallel list for the descendants of Benjamin living in their villages. It mentions towns like Jeba, Michmash, Bethel up north, Anathoth, Jeremiah's hometown, Ramah, Lod, and Ono.
Okay.
And it specifically places some of this Benjaminite settlement in the Valley of the Craftsmen.
A Valley of the Craftsmen. What do you think that signifies?
Well, it likely indicates an area known for particular trades or skills. It shows that people might have settled based on their occupations or economic functions too, not just tribal lines.
That's another layer of detail. So specific locations for specific groups or functions. Did these tribal areas overlap at all?
Interestingly, yes. It notes that some divisions of the Levites from Judah also settled in Benjaminite territory.
Ah, so the Levites weren't just confined to Judah or Jerusalem.
No, they were dispersed where needed, providing religious services across the different resettled areas. It shows integration.
And wasn't there one more figure mentioned, sort of overseeing things?
Yes, right at the end, it mentions Pethahiah, son of Meshezbel. He was a descendant of Zerah from Judah and served as the king's agent in all matters concerning the people.
The king's agent. So a link back to the Persian imperial structure.
Exactly. A reminder that this rebuilding was happening within the context of the Persian Empire, and there was official oversight connecting the local community to that broader administration.
Okay, so pulling back from all those names and places, this chapter is incredibly detailed. What does it really tell us overall about their priorities and the sheer challenge they were facing? It's clearly more than just a list.
Oh, absolutely. It's not just a census. It's more like a strategic blueprint for rebuilding a society. The level of detail shows a highly deliberate, organized plan.
A plan focused on Jerusalem first.
Jerusalem was definitely a major focus, making sure the capital, the religious and administrative heart, was populated and fully functional with all the necessary roles. Priests, Levites, security, leadership.
Right.
But at the same time, There was this conscious parallel effort to reclaim and resettle the wider territory, the ancestral lands outside the city, reestablishing agriculture community life across Judah and Benjamin.
And the methods used, the lots, the volunteering, the specific assignments really highlight how intentional it all was.
It does. It speaks volumes about the challenges,
Mm.
getting people to move, especially back to a city that was still potentially vulnerable. They used a combination of mandate, appeal to commitment, and careful organization to make it happen.
It shows a community really focused on structure, social, religious, governmental structure tied to specific places.
Yeah, they were actively engineering their comeback, deciding who needed to be where, and what roles were essential for the whole society to function again in, well, a pretty complex situation.
So this deep dive into Nehemiah 11 really gives us the practical blueprint, the organizational chart, if you will, for the resettlement after the exile.
It definitely moves us from the big picture of wall building to the granular reality of putting people back on the land. It shows the deliberate process leadership, the system for Jerusalem using lots and volunteers, assigning specific roles.
Priests, Levites, gatekeepers.
Right, all those vital functions, and mapping it all out geographically across the capital and the surrounding towns.
It really is a testament to the meticulous planning needed to turn ruins back into a living, breathing community.
It is this very structured approach, this level of deliberate planning, deciding who goes where,
Yeah.
down to the specific districts and roles. It's incredibly revealing.
So here's something maybe for you to ponder. What does this intense focus on structure, on assigned roles, on specific locations, from casting lots for the capital to listing villages across the land, tell you about the scale of the challenge they faced, and perhaps what they valued most as they sought to rebuild their nation at this absolutely critical juncture?